Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, April the 17th. EJ here with Warriors Path. I want to thank you for tuning into my talk, my show, my podcast, wherever you're getting this information, my website, Facebook, wherever you're getting it from today. I want to thank you for joining me today. I want to thank you for giving me the time to speak to you today. I'm truly honored and very gracious for your time. Today is going to be a talk on trauma, and that can be triggering for some individuals. It can be hard to listen to. It can be hard to just to try and understand these topics of trauma and everything that goes around them. So I just need to put that warning out there. This is about trauma, and if you become triggered during my talk, I encourage you to stop, pause, ground yourself, reach out to someone, and resume when you feel safe to do so. So just for some context, I myself am a trauma survivor. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, childhood emotional abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse. I'm a survivor of these things. I'm also a intergenerational residential school survivor. What that means is I personally myself did not attend residential school, but I had individuals who went to residential school and they raised me, and they had me live the residential school experience through them. So so that's just what that is. If you want to know more about that, send me a message, and we can definitely talk about it, because that's another conversation for another time. So my talk today is called The Path Back to Ourself. So it's just a talk on trauma and healing. And like I said, I want to thank you for being here and for listening, because showing up in spaces like this, where we talk about trauma, healing, and being human, is in fact an act of courage. So like I said, today I want to talk about trauma, but not in the way that we usually think about it. So trauma isn't just what happened to you, it's what happened inside of you as a result of the trauma. It's the wound that lives on long after the traumatic event is over. And for many of us, that wound looks like disconnection. Disconnection from our bodies, disconnection from our emotions, disconnection from who we really are. But that disconnection wasn't a failure. It's a survival strategy. So our nervous systems, even as children, are incredibly wise. When we were too young to fight or flee, our bodies chose the only thing they could, and that was to freeze, shut down, disconnect. So it's not weakness, that's brilliance, that's resilience, but that comes at a cost. See, as children, we have two basic needs. One is for attachment, to be connected, loved, and safe with the people around us. And the other is authenticity, right? To feel what we feel, to speak our truth, and to be who we really are. But when being authentic risks our connection, when expressing ourselves leads to punishment, rejection, or abandonment, we learn to silence ourselves to stay connected. And we do it without even realizing it. And so that's where the trauma begins. In the moment when a child decides it's not safe to be me. So we adapt. We become who we think we need to be. We become quiet. We become helpful. We become tough. We become invisible. We become the peacekeeper, the perfectionist, the overachiever, and slowly we drift away from our true selves. For me, as an Indigenous man, a counselor, therapist in training, this understanding hits deep. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in the men I sit in circles, in the families I support, in the stories passed down in my community. This is not just individual trauma. This is also collective trauma. Colonization had to sever our connection to the land, our language, our families, and our culture. And that kind of trauma doesn't end in one generation. It ripples forward until someone says, it stops with me. But here's the truth. Trauma is not the end of the story. In fact, it can be just a beginning. Because even though trauma disconnects us, it also leaves clues. Clues about where we lost ourselves. And if we can follow these clues with curiosity and compassion, we can begin to find our way home. So let me give you an example. Let's say someone raises their voice at you and you instantly feel small, panicked, or you feel angry. That reaction might seem, quote unquote, over the top, but it makes perfect sense when you realize that your body is remembering something. It's saying, quote unquote, this feels like danger. And it's not about the voice you hear now. It's about the voice you heard years ago when you had no power to protect yourself. That's the body's wisdom. Or maybe you have had a hard time saying no. You know, you take care of everyone else. You say yes when you're exhausted and when you feel resentful or burned out. That's not just poor boundaries. That's a child's survival strategy still running the show. Because somewhere along the way, you've learned that love was conditional, that saying no meant losing connection. So you buried your authenticity to protect your attachment. But here's the good news. What was learned can be unlearned. And what was broken in relationship can also be healed in relationship. So what does healing actually look like? Well, first it looks like compassionate curiosity. We stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what happened to me? And how did I learn to survive? That shift changes everything. Second, it looks like coming back into the body. Trauma lives in the nervous system, so it's not just in the mind. So healing means grounding, breathing, moving, and feeling. It means letting the body know it's safe now. And third, it means reclaiming our quote-unquote no. Because we can say no, our yes doesn't mean much. Because until we say no, our yes doesn't mean much. Learning to set boundaries isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's how we protect our truth. And for many of us, that starts small. Saying no when we're tired, saying no when we don't agree, saying no to self-betrayal. And lastly, healing looks like reconnection. Reconnecting with ourselves, with others, with community, with culture, with ceremony. For Indigenous people, this means reclaiming what was taken, our songs, our story, our kinship systems, our medicine ways. These aren't just cultural practices, they are pathways home. So you see, healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who we were before the world told us to forget. So I want to leave you with a few questions, ones I return to often in my own life and in my own work. Where in your life are you still saying yes when you really mean no? What parts of yourself have you had to hide to stay connected? And what would it look like just for today to come back to yourself? Healing isn't quick. It's not easy, but it is possible. And it begins when we stop running from our pain and start listening to what it's trying to teach us. There's a path back to yourself. And I can tell you this, it's already inside you. So I just want to revisit the part of trauma as disconnection. So like I said, when we talk about trauma, many of us picture it as a major event. So we picture it as abuse, violence, or neglect. But trauma isn't the event itself. It's the internal response that stays with us, right? It's the wound we carry long after the trauma or danger is gone. Often it shows up in our bodies as stress, in our relationships as defensiveness, or in our thoughts as shame or self-blame. So at the root of trauma is disconnection. So disconnection, not just from others, but from ourselves, from our emotions, our bodies, and even our sense of who we are. And that disconnection wasn't a conscious choice, like I said earlier. It was a brilliant survival adaptation. As children, we were emotionally dependent on caregivers. If our emotions were too overwhelming, or if being fully ourselves meant risking love or safety, we learned to disconnect. That was wise. It kept us alive. But what saved us then can hurt us now. This kind of trauma lives in the nervous system, right? It's why a harmless comment can trigger a flood of emotion. It's why we overreact, shut down, or carry a deep fear of being misunderstood. What we think is about the present is often our past showing up again. So I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, my wife called me, and she my wife works at the local school over here, and she called me and she's like, Eric, I'm just going to stay here because we want to do a talent show. And so she's already been gone all day, right? She leaves at 8 a.m. and she's not typically back till about 4:30, 5 o'clock at the end of the day. So this is already going on to 6 o'clock. I haven't seen her all day, haven't had the connection that I'm used to with her. And she gives me a call and simply says, I'm going to stay. There's a talent show going on. And I got angry. I didn't start yelling at her. But my tone changed. My whole environment changed. And I was like, yeah, fine, whatever. I put on this little child pouting. And I was like, well, after I thought about it, she's like, are you mad? I'm like, no, I'm fine. And I hung up. Clearly I was angry, but I, sat down and I thought about it a little bit later, and I was like, well, why was I so angry? What happened? And in that moment, without reflecting on trauma, I just said, oh, well, it's because I miss her, and because, I just wanted to spend time with her. I just wanted to, I miss spending that quality time together. But that wasn't it at all. See, growing up as a child, I was neglected, I was abandoned, among other things, but that's what came in. Right? My body took that as neglect and abandonment. So again, my present, I wasn't living in the present. My past showed up. And that's what caused me to act or react or overreact the way that I did. Right? The good news is these wounds can heal. Right? Unlike physical scar tissue, which hardens and loses sensation, emotional wounds can soften, feel, and reintegrate. But healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering who we are beneath the layers we built to survive. So that's one thing I need to work on, is I need to try and remember that. When 99.99% of the time when you're angry, it's not because you're living in the present. It's because you're actually living in the past. And that was something that Dr. Gabor Mate had talked about, was that when we're angry, more often than not, it's because it's our past, our childhood past that has shown up. And we just need to take a moment and just reflect and sit back and really see what is going on there in that situation. So now we might ask ourselves, well, how does trauma embed itself in my body and in my mind? How is this an automatic response? Well, modern science shows us that trauma literally changes us, right? From the brain right to the immune system. So the stress chemicals that flood a child's body during unsafe experiences shape how they develop. Even the womb is not immune. A mother's stress during pregnancy can impact the baby's ability to regulate emotions or cope with stress later on in life. So this isn't just about psychology, it's also about biology, right? Childhood trauma can lead to changes in the brain circuits that affect mood regulation, impulse control, and even learning. It can increase inflammation in the body. It can shorten our telomeres. So those are those little protective caps on our DNA. If you want to think about it, take a look at your shoestrings, the little plastic piece that keeps it all bound up together at the end. Those are kind of what our telomeres are like, right? So these are protective caps on our DNA. And even, trauma even alters how our genes express themselves. So this field, this is all called epigenetics. So this shows how trauma can be inherited, not just through stories or behavior, but through biology itself. So, and this has generational consequences, right? Many of the challenges we see, especially in Indigenous communities, high rates of addiction, suicide, chronic illness, aren't just about personal behavior. They are the legacy of, colonial violence, cultural disruption, and forced disconnection from land, from language, and from family. So this is also called, or what's referred to as, collective trauma. And it's real. But so is collective healing. So one way trauma becomes visible is in how we respond to danger, or what we perceive as danger. Some of us are always on alert, expecting betrayal or being hurt. Others struggle to recognize danger at all, walking into harmful situations without realizing. Both of those are adaptations. Both of those come from survival, and neither is our fault. And as children, so we have two basic needs as children, right? We need to be connected and we need to be ourselves, right? Those are our two basic needs that children have. But when those needs clash, from being authentic, meaning risking rejection, we choose connection, right? Every time, because as children, connections equals survival. So this is where attachment and the cost of losing our authenticity comes in, right? And over time, this choice teaches us to abandon parts of ourselves, right? Our angers, our needs, our quote unquote no. We learn that pleasing others keeps us safe. We become experts at reading the room, suppressing discomfort, and saying yes when every part of us wants to say no. But here's the truth. If you can't say no, your yes doesn't mean much. And I mentioned this earlier. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about making room for real connection. And without boundaries, we betray ourselves over and over. And eventually, the cost shows up as resentment, exhaustion, illness, or even emotional numbing. So learning to say no, especially when it feels selfish or scary, is one of the most important parts of healing. It's a return to authenticity. And often when people struggle with chronic stress or even autoimmune issues, there's a history of self-abandonment behind it, especially for women and caregivers who've been conditioned to meet everyone else's needs first. And I mean, I could go into more depth on these subjects, and I'm going to down the road. But for right now, I just kind of wanted to introduce this whole concept of all these attachment issues, abandonment, and how trauma can influence our mind and in our body. So how can we integrate this understanding to bring healing into work? So what do we do with all of this, right? Well, number one, we stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what happened to me? This question shifts us from shame to curiosity, from blame to understanding, right? Number two, we remember that trauma is not who we are, it's what happened to us. And what happened to us can be witnessed, felt, and healed. Number three, we reclaim the parts of ourselves we left behind to survive. So the anger, the needs, the tears, the truth, they're still there and they're still valid. All right. Number four, we invite compassion into the process, not just for others, but for ourselves. We heal not through fixing, but through reconnecting. Reconnecting to self, reconnecting to the community, to the land, and to the spirit. Number 5, we reconnect through culture, story, ceremony, and relationships. And this is especially true for Indigenous peoples. This means reclaiming what colonization tried to erase. For everyone, it means remembering that healing is rational. We don't do it alone. And so at the end of this talk, just to bring it all together, I just want you to think about this. Healing doesn't mean we go back to who we were before the trauma. It means we become more of who we truly are. And now that we're safe enough to be whole. So again, ask yourself, where in my life am I still saying yes when I mean no? Where am I still carrying shame that was never mine to carry? And where have I mistaken survival for selfhood? This again is the path back to ourselves. And again, I want to thank you for listening to me. This is just kind of a introduction of some of the talks that I want to do down the road. Just introducing trauma. I will eventually get into my own traumatic stories of my own childhood, because I believe I can share and you can learn and grow with me, and we can learn off of one another's stories. And the problem with trauma is nobody really wants to talk about it because it's mixed in with shame and guilt. And that's why healing doesn't really happen. In fact, it doesn't happen. And so we need to try and get over that and just remember that the trauma is not who we are. It's what happened to us. So it's not our fault. And again, we need to try and heal from that. So I want to thank you for listening to me these 20 minutes or so. I really appreciate it. And again, EJ here with Warrior's Path. Again, this is just an introductory, or I'm not teaching, I'm just sharing. So this is just kind of where I kind of want to go with these podcasts and these whatever you want to call it. Again, have yourself a wonderful day. Take care of yourself. Again, as I'm always saying, reach out to someone. You're not alone. You're loved, you're cared for, and reach out to anyone that you need to help you get through the day. Okay, I'm going to let you go now. Much love and respect. I thank you for listening. Have a great day.